It is my great pleasure to introduce Jason Miller, the Deputy Director of the National Economic Council, the White House, and Special Assistant to the President for Manufacturing Policy. We work closely with Jason, both at the Council and DOE, and his team on implementing the nation's manufacturing strategy, and we could not ask for a better partner in this effort. Jason's been with the administration since 2010, and prior to joining the administration, he was advising global companies at BCG in San Francisco, working with senior executives in energy, technology, and manufacturing sectors on a number of cross-cutting issues. Originally from Chicago, it's a BA from UPenn, MBA from Kellogg School at Northwestern, and MPA from Harvard School of Government. Please join me in welcoming Jason Miller, a true champion for American competitiveness in manufacturing.
Good morning, good midday. Not sure what to greet people with at about 11:15. I hope everyone's doing well today. This is incredible. I was able to participate in this event last year, and thank you for taking the time out of all of the cool stuff that's out in the atrium. I want to give, first of all, a huge thank you to the Department of Energy team, Secretary Moniz, Dr. Danielson, their whole team have been phenomenal partners over the last 5+ years on our focus on manufacturing competitiveness. And of course, to Deborah Wynn-Smith and the Council have been huge champions for many years, but a great partner with us on this project and others. Now, before outlining President Obama's approach to revitalizing our manufacturing sector, I think it's important for us to take a step back and look at the context of current and recent economic performance. The U.S. economy continues to grow steadily, having added over 10 million private sector jobs over 54 straight months of job growth. That is the longest streak of job growth on record, period. GDP is well above the peak prior to the recession, and thanks to policy choices and the grit and resilience of the American people, we have recovered at a faster pace than nearly all other advanced economies. And notably, we have added 705,000 new direct manufacturing jobs since February of 2010, the first period of sustained manufacturing job growth since the 1990s. Now, while we are making progress, there's a lot of work left to do. Now, within this context, I think it's important to think about three interrelated elements of sound economic policy. First, continuing to spur growth and job creation to help the economy reach its full potential. Second, putting in place the policies that increase our potential economic growth. And third, doing everything we can to ensure that our growth is broadly shared, that opportunities exist for everyone who works hard and plays by the rules. Now, one of the challenges that we've had over the last several years in the debate on U.S. manufacturing competitiveness has been a disagreement over the purpose of manufacturing policy. Is this about creating jobs as part of our recovery? Is this about building a more innovative, prosperous economy for the future? Is this about providing high-quality jobs to help grow the middle class? The answer is yes. It plays a role in all three. Manufacturing generates high-quality American jobs across the economy. When many see the kinds of technologies that are out beyond those doors and a lot of the companies that are being featured today, too many assume that the future of manufacturing is one of silent factories, one with fewer and fewer workers, where manufacturing does not play a role in job creation for our economy. But if you only look at what happens within the four walls of a factory, you're ignoring the role that manufacturing plays across the economy. Manufacturing supports millions of jobs throughout integrated supply chains and millions more in the communities supported by the wealth it creates. And while this view of silent factories undercounts the jobs that manufacturing supports, it also fails to envision future jobs for which we will need the capabilities that manufacturing helps develop to innovate and compete. If you look in Michigan, the fastest growing technical jobs in the state of Michigan are software and application developers due to the huge demand for programmers who can build applications that go into today's cars. So there's a critical linkage between our manufacturing capabilities and jobs more broadly across the economy. In addition, a core reason we care about manufacturing, even if we were at a point of full employment, which we are not yet at, is that manufacturing is inextricably linked to our ability to innovate, and therefore our economic growth potential as a country. Despite representing 12% of GDP, manufacturing accounts for about 3/4 of private sector research, 60% of all private sector R&D employees, and the vast majority of patents that we issue. Now, many others today will cover this terrain, but it's increasingly recognized by both policymakers and businesses that the capabilities gained in production are intertwined with new learning and the knowledge activities of research, development, and design. And it's a two-way street, a manufacturing innovation feedback loop. The risk to our economy, of course, is that if we're willing to allow those production capabilities to erode, we lose our ability to produce things. We create a vicious cycle that makes the US less attractive for new manufacturing and ultimately puts at risk our capability to innovate and compete for future jobs and future growth. Now, despite these benefits, despite these drivers for sound manufacturing policy, many have continued to argue against any focus on the importance of manufacturing. Some have argued that the declines in manufacturing from the last decade in employment were actually a good thing, that was the result of technological progress. While US manufacturing employment technically peaked in 1979, for the most part, absolute employment in our manufacturing sector has been steady over the last, prior to 2000, many decades. In 1965, there were 17.3 million Americans employed in US manufacturing. In 1999, there were 17.3 million Americans employed in US manufacturing. Now, over that period of time, over those 35 years, manufacturing production, the physical amount of stuff we made, grew by about 3.5% on an annual basis. It was actually relatively steady, 3.5% for decades. In the 1990s, after a decade worrying about the rise of Japan and the impact on US competitiveness, the US experienced the fastest pace of manufacturing production growth, capacity expansion, and employment growth in years. But then last decade happened, and last decade was different. From 2000 to 2009, our manufacturing sector lost 1/3 of its workforce, 5.7 million jobs. In fact, there was no 12-month period last decade where we actually added manufacturing jobs. No 12-month period. 60,000 factories closed. 40% of our largest factories, those employing more than 1,000 people, closed. And now, while many have debated the drivers of this decline, how much of a failure of trade enforcement or a lack of focus on the kinds of policies that spur manufacturing competitiveness, I think it's fair to state that those arguing that these changes were brought on by continued technological progress and growth and productivity are just flat out wrong. The reality of the last decade is not a story of surging productivity, it is a story of stagnating production. From 2000 to 2010, manufacturing production in the United States declined by 5%. If manufacturing had grown at its historical rate, the 3.5% per year from 65 to 99, we would have been producing 40% more stuff in 2010 than we did in 2000. That's what caused our job losses last decade. That's what led to a surge in our trade deficits. Now, since the end of the recession, manufacturing has been growing again, and this growth has led to a new debate, whether these gains have been part of what one would expect, cyclical recovery, or they signal a new structural shift, a new competitiveness, a renaissance in manufacturing. Now, we believe when you look at the data, there's no way to explain that this growth was caused by cyclical factors alone. In fact, in the economic report of the president 2 years ago, the President's Council of Economic Advisors, CEA member Jim Stock, looked at this very question and found if you look at the current recovery compared to previous recoveries, adjusting for a set of long-term economic trends, including globalization, that the recent performance strongly suggests employment and production growth in manufacturing cannot be explained by cyclical factors alone, and in fact, their analysis found that less than 1/4 of employment growth since 2010 was due to a cyclical rebound. If you look over that period, U.S. has gained global share of exports at a faster pace than all other major countries except for China. And overall export growth has been a multiple of the average for other advanced economies and much faster than emerging Asia. So whether or not you call this a renaissance, it is clear that the prospects for U.S. manufacturing are far brighter than they were just a few short years ago when many considered that manufacturing was gone. Now, some have argued that this growth has been the result largely of an expansion of lower wage jobs. Steve Ratner made this point in the New York Times op-ed last year, but I think this view mistakes anecdotes for evidence and ignores the data about longer-term trends in manufacturing wages. In August of last year, the Department of Commerce looked at this, released a report that shows new hires in manufacturing enjoy an earnings premium of 38% relative to new hires in other sectors. So new hires, 38% premium. And that premium, that recent premium, was higher than it had been in the past. It had grown slightly. Moreover, the report found that the earnings of new hires relative to incumbent workers has stayed consistent at about 70% over the last decade, including through the period of job growth since 2010. Now, there are a lot of reasons that we should be optimistic about the future of U.S. manufacturing. One area that I think has garnered little attention is the average number of hours worked per week in the manufacturing sector. The average hours per week in manufacturing production is up to about 42 hours per week. While the rest of the economy, that has been hotly debated because that number has been flat or at times declining, it has steadily grown throughout this recovery. 42 hours per week is the highest level in the United States since World War II, and more than 1 hour per week higher than the average over the last 2 decades. I think you can view that as pent-up hiring in the manufacturing sector. If manufacturers hired to bring the level back to recent historical averages, we would have another 300,000 manufacturing workers, which would mean instead of 700,000 direct jobs created, we would have over 1 million. When you look at surveys of business executives, the U.S. is seen as a more competitive location than it's been in decades. Companies like the Boston Consulting Group have found that manufacturing executives are increasingly considering bringing production back from China to the United States. And an A.T. Kearney survey of global executives found that the U.S. is the top destination for job-creating foreign direct investment for the second year in a row, the first time that the U.S. has been at the top of that since 2001, surging past China, Brazil, and others. Some of today's speakers and others this afternoon, of course, have pointed to our low-cost energy providing a huge new source of advantage, particularly natural gas. U.S. natural gas prices are roughly half that of Europe, a third of that of Asia. That means tens of billions in dollars in energy savings relative to competitors. It's why there are so many planned projects underway in capital-intensive or in energy-intensive sectors. But more than that, analysts estimate that the supply chain impacts on non-energy intensive sectors could lower costs by 1% to 2% in companies that are non-energy intensive. While that sounds like a small number for all the manufacturers in the room, a 1% to 2% overall decline in costs as a result of low-cost natural gas would make a huge difference. And of course, manufacturing entrepreneurship is on the rise. We as a country have looked at and struggled with, are we still creating the same number of companies? Are we still starting new businesses at the rate that we have in decades past? A huge American source of advantage. Now, when you look at manufacturing, the answer is surprising. Advances in new technology that can democratize production are a new way that this country can compete and win. Technologies like additive manufacturing, digital manufacturing are lowering the cost and reducing the time to make prototypes, to alter production processes, and to commercialize new products. Our strength in software allows us to lead in these new technologies, where products are digitally designed, tested, and assembled before production scale-up. Today, 80% of the world's software is produced in the United States, and we have more than 50% of the world's high-performance computing systems, providing us a huge advantage. This wave of technologies has also introduced a new wave of hobbyists that perhaps, like the homebrew computer club that included young entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the maker movement could spur new companies and even new industries that today we can't imagine. In May, President Obama hosted the first ever White House Maker Faire, highlighting the excitement in this space, the excitement across the country in making things. Mayors, university presidents, students, entrepreneurs all came to the White House showing the power of the imagination, the power of production. Now, one of the exhibits at the Maker Faire was from a company called BD Robotics, a family team from North Carolina where the 12 and 14-year-old BD girls are the heart of the company. And as they say, who needs a paper route when you can start a robotics company? I think those are the types of things that should make us optimistic about the potential for American manufacturing. Now, that's not to say that we don't have real barriers to overcome. We do. We've underinvested in manufacturing for a long time. While the economies of locating here are better than they've been in years, rebuilding our capabilities and our manufacturing infrastructure, rebuilding our supply chains, that's going to take time, and it's going to take significant investment. To put a finer point on it, as of 2012, the average age of equipment and software, capital equipment in the manufacturing sector, had risen to its highest level since 1940. Our capital equipment was older than it had been since 1940. When you look at the median age of US manufacturing workers, the average median age is 45. And for high-skilled production workers, some have estimated that the average is 56. We need major reinvestment in people, in equipment, and technologies if we're going to take advantage of the opportunities in front of us. From a policy perspective, we've put in place a strategy that focuses on 4 pillars designed to make it more attractive to produce in the US and build the capabilities and assets we need to sustain a strong industrial base. First, increasing the competitiveness of the US as a location for production by reforming our tax code, expanding our energy advantage, and investing in our infrastructure. Second, expanding our innovative edge by investing in cross-cutting research and development and new manufacturing technologies, and by building a national network of manufacturing innovation institutes to connect our research base to our production base. Third, ensuring we have the human capital at all levels that we need to excel by investing in our workforce, our businesses, and our communities. And of course, this includes fixing our broken immigration system. And fourth, leveling the playing field by both opening access to markets and ensuring that our trading partners are playing by the rules. Those two have to go hand in hand. Now, the Department of Energy has played a central role in this administration's manufacturing policy, particularly those focused on expanding our innovative edge. The department has been a leader in driving the president's proposal to create a national network of manufacturing innovation institutes, in investing in new cross-cutting manufacturing technologies, in developing the research, the technology, and the know-how to compete for the next wave of energy technologies, and in developing the human capital through our labs, our universities, and our companies to compete for the next innovation. The growing dialogue over the last several years on the importance of manufacturing, the enormous attendance and excitement behind events like this that have only grown with time, the increased focus from academia, business, and government to solve these challenges together, exemplified by the President's Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, suggests to me that we are focused on these challenges and on the solutions to them in a way that we have not been in years. I really believe that these next 5 years are absolutely critical in taking advantage of these opportunities to recapitalize and reinvigorate American manufacturing. We have an enormous opportunity. Excitement around discussions like today, the companies and ideas that come out of it are absolutely critical to seizing on those opportunities. Thank you for including me in this discussion.